Welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest, and on this episode, I'm looking at a Porsche Cayenne that has a pretty bad oil leak. It's leaking down onto the exhaust every time the customer drives this vehicle. They can smell the oil burning, and as you can tell, it's a pretty nice vehicle. My customer put a ton of work into this. They got it for $3,000, and they put over $20,000 worth of work into it. He really likes cars, and his specialty used to be tapestries and upholstery, so he did all the work himself, painting everything and fixing everything up. But when it comes to anything mechanical, he knows I'm going to treat his cars right, do everything the right way. So today I'm going to take care of this oil leak. We're going to have to take care of the valve cover gasket. Now, the customer ordered the gaskets themselves, so the first thing I always do off the bat is just double check the part numbers and double check that we're looking at the right thing and we're going to replace the right thing. Before I started the camera, I already stuck an inspection camera down there and double checked it was on the passenger side, and you can see the other Porsche right behind this one. I went ahead and looked at that as well. It's got a valve cover leak on the driver's side, so I might come back up here and do that one day, but just know we've already got ahead and checked this out real well before we're going ahead to do the replacement. And right off the bat, the first thing I'm going to have to worry about, classic nice car, is just a bunch of plastic in the way. So I'm going to get the beauty covers out of the way, all the plastic trim in the engine bay. That's just going to make a lot more space being able to work. I don't even think you'd be able to do it without taking these off. Now, these clips were pretty hard to deal with, but I was pretty careful and only kind of broke one of them, so I'm going to be able to put all these back just like I took them out. Well, the garage was closed. It was still pretty warm. It's starting to get warm, but I say that it's getting cold and warm on and off. The spring's been pretty wet for Utah. Luckily, I was in a garage today, but it was still pretty warm. I couldn't open the trunk though, so I went ahead and just did the battery disconnect under the hood on the driver's side here, and we'll just make sure that that's connected well before I get going. Some of the stuff inside the car still works whenever you disconnect that, so I'd much rather just disconnect the battery, but whatever, we'll go with this. Okay, now I'm going to hop over to the other side, and I have to get the air filter box taken out, the air filter out of the way, and there's a hose on the back of that air filter box that you have to remove a plastic cap and kind of disconnect it like some fuel hoses. So I was just careful with that, disconnected that, and I'm going to go ahead and get the mass airflow sensor out of there as well. Kind of do all of it at the same time, and that'll get me room to look at this valve cover, but I still can't quite get to those yet either. Okay, here's a weird little angle looking back down at the motor, and you can see there's like an air pump on both sides. I'm pretty sure these are just air pumps, and I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the one right here. It has a bracket that's gonna be in the way as well, but I've got to get the air pump out first, and then that bracket's actually pretty tricky. It was a lot trickier getting back in than it was taking out. Now, I don't think you'll particularly need a triple square socket, and I mean need, like, depends on where you live. If you're not in the Rust Belt, I guess. I wouldn't have needed one because I could just hold the front with a pair of pliers. There's actually a 16mm bolt on the back, but if you have any sort of rust and you really need to put some torque on that bolt, it is a triple square. And obviously you can see this motor torque arm is in the valve cover. It is a good design though, where it just bolts on through the valve cover, so I'll be able to take this off and get to the valve cover without much problems. I mean, when it comes to German engineering, a lot of things don't make sense. There's like a beauty cover underneath a beauty cover. I mean, there's just beauty covers on everything nowadays. But this one's confusing because it's like a puzzle. You really have to put it in the right order. And I was stressed about that, putting it back together. It works. And now, like I mentioned, there's that bracket for the air pump. It's held on by three little, everything on this car is going to be Torx and e-Torx and triple square, so I made sure to bring those with me. But that's pretty hard to get out, and after that I was able to go ahead and get after these valve cover bolts, which again are e-Torx, and I'm just making sure I try and get all those out and do everything carefully, and then I'm going to clean up the area afterwards. I was just going to pry it with a normal screwdriver pry bar. A lot of valve covers have a spot for that. I couldn't find one on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab my little small purse, my rubber mallet, and see what that'll do. Seems like there's still a bolt stuck on there, so obviously I'll look around, and obviously if it feels like there is one, there probably is one right in the back. Oops. This thing broke off. As I was taking it out, I heard it fall. Luckily it didn't fall into the motor. Also, that's pretty jacked up. Somebody's bonked on that before. Signs of that getting broken right now here. Tensioner. Alright, here's a good look at just the inside of that valve cover if you're curious. It's a double overhead cam, and making sure that everything looks clean, that no debris fell in there, everything looks pretty good. And we do have those new seals for the spark plugs, but we don't have the seals for that one piece that was busted up. We don't have that seal, so that's pretty annoying. I'm going to do my best to seal that back up anyways, but let's go ahead and clean this up. I'm going to have to take that other gasket out. I'll just show you when I've got that one going back in and I've got everything cleaned up on that side. Again, we're going to be able to seal everything else up, especially those spark plug tubes, but we'll just see what happens. For a second I was afraid that this was the wrong gasket somehow, even though I double checked, but it was just kind of flipped inside out, if you know what I mean. And if there's ever form a gasket like where two pieces of metal come together, like the timing chain cover, particularly if you have a timing chain cover, then you'll need to put form a gasket on that little joint, especially if there already was form a gasket, there should have been. So I'll make sure to put that on when I'm done, and we'll get this gasket put in real nice and tight. It has to line up perfectly. This one has a lot of different slots. Just some German engineering for you. All right, just like I took everything out, I'm just trying to put everything back together, but even more carefully. And also just trying to give that form a gasket like 15 minutes to set up. I tried to set the gasket or the valve cover on there nice and straight so that gasket hit that form a gasket nice and straight. And then I had to tighten all the bolts down by hand first. I wanted to get them all started by hand so I know this thing is nice and square. And then I'll tighten them down with a wrench, and we'll get back to that bracket in the back too. That was tricky. Okay, here's what everything looks like. I actually got some form of gasket stuff down in there and around that seal nice and well. If I ever do have to replace it, or can in the future, at least it comes out the top, so I can try and do that without removing the valve cover. But that was kind of just some bad luck today that that kit didn't come with that seal. I don't know why it wouldn't. And now we're talking about getting that air pump and its bracket back into place. It took me a good few minutes to line that up, and then again I made sure they were all started by hand before I tighten anything down. And I make sure when I do a bracket or anything like that that I get all the bolts started before I tighten one down, because if you have it misaligned, then let's say there's 4 bolts and you get all 4 going and you tighten those down, a lot of times the 5th one won't tighten down, so you got to get them all started first, then start tightening them down. But I was just real careful putting everything back together. Like I said, it was like a puzzle, making sure that those beauty covers got back on in the right order, and I think I nailed it the first try. And I didn't get any clips of this car running afterwards. We did warm it up, but I was just talking to the customer. The customer was in and out all throughout the job talking, and we were talking about his other vehicles as well. He has quite a cool collection. So maybe perhaps there was a step I missed. I think I've pretty much got everything, especially with the voiceovers. But if you have any questions about this, or you want to let me know anything, leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching this episode of Roadside Rescue. If you made it this far, make sure you're subscribed. And if you want to help out, you can donate at the links in the description. Check out the next episode right up here. I'll see you there. That's a job well done.